The Wire was an amazing show with excellent writing that branched out into many aspects of society. As a result, unlike many of its contemporary shows like The Sopranos, where Tony is clearly the lead, The Wire has no obviously identifiable main character. So in this episode on Bully Whispers, inspired by a stream I did with Talk Nice Media, we will take a look at The Wire and see if we can't identify the main character. In doing so, we will examine the most common answers, evaluating how they would and or would not fit the description, and end with my thoughts as to whom the main character is, although I would love to know your thoughts on it down in the comments section. Before digging in, I'd like to take a second to differentiate between the main character and the protagonist. A story is usually centered around the main character, who acts as a surrogate for the audience, and is often the protagonist driving things forward, but not always. A good literary example of this, within the context of The Wire, is the book The Great Gatsby that D'Angelo was reading in his prison book club. In that story, Nick Carraway, the narrator, is the main character, but Jay Gatsby is the protagonist that moves the story forward. The most popular pick for the main character of The Wire, at least for people who don't want to go abstract with it, is Jimmy McNulty. And since the main character is usually the focus of the story, the numbers back this up. According to Screen Time data, citing IMDb sources, McNulty does have a sizable lead over the other characters in terms of screen time, which does set him up to be a good guy main character, and yes, he is a good guy. The days of the squeaky clean heroes are waning, and most good guys these days have another side to them. Even when he went off the rails with faking the serial killer, his heart was in the right place, as his intention was to get more resources for the department. That being said, due to the reactionary nature of police work, especially detectives, he's not usually the one pushing things forward. He's reacting to what he's presented with. The true protagonist would have to be the criminals he's chasing, without whom he is irrelevant. After all, nobody cares about the good guy until a bad guy shows up. However, when we take a look back at the screen time chart, the only gangster to crack the top 10 was Stringer Bell, who was the least significant of all the major gangsters, but it does fit with the fact that McNulty obsessed with him for the first part of the series, and this tells us two things. First, screen time in and of itself may not carry as much weight as you think. Second, and more importantly for this discussion, it backs up with stats what we see watching the show, which is that McNulty is constantly going on his own path, towards his own goals, and they aren't always in line with the direction of the show as a whole. For me at least, this makes him seem like a very significant character, but not the main one. At this point, another popular theory takes a step back and poses that The Wire is a police show in general, with the Baltimore PD being the main character. Again, this would line up with screen time, since 9 of the top 10 were cops, and it would fit with the gangsters, politicians, and media being other protagonists and antagonists of the show from outside the department, but it wouldn't explain the inclusion of the school system into the plot as heavily as it was. While situations like Randy being a potential witness may make sense in the context of a police series, why bother with showing the corner kids class, the problems with focusing on test scores, etc.? None of that plays into the narrative of a cop drama, which shows us that the series is broader in scope than that. And this is where the theories start becoming more abstract. The most popular among those theories are that the city of Baltimore itself is the main character, or perhaps even the game itself. The game, at least in an American context, usually refers to either an ongoing criminal enterprise, such as drug dealing, which could apply here, or dating, which clearly doesn't, but when it's described as the main character in this series, it expands to the politicians playing their game, the newspapers playing theirs, etc., at which point the game just refers to human nature. And since it's impossible to write a story about humans without human nature, to me, that just makes it part of the setting for almost every story. Similarly, Baltimore is not a main character, it's a setting regardless of how formidable of a presence it may be. Even in stories where the setting is an extreme factor, like A Man Stranded in the Woods, if the man isn't the main character, then you're just describing the woods.
Some birds up ahead flying. Some weeds across the street there. I think I see a rabbit or a squirrel. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a possum.
And The Wire is hardly a documentary about Baltimore. So what is it?
He's going to ask us that like we don't know. He's going to answer his own question.
The answer to that question is in the name of the series, The Wire. And what is the purpose of The Wire? The purpose of The Wire was to follow the money because money makes the world go round, especially the world depicted in that show. So following the money is a search for the protagonist. The main purpose of the show seems to be the search for a protagonist, and this is a mind frame the audience adopts as well. Constantly watching where the money trail leads and who is responsible for what is an integral part of the viewer experience, and that's why I think Lester Freamon is the main character of the series. Since he is the one primarily responsible for maintaining the wire and following the trail, he acts as the audience surrogate in the show, as opposed to McNulty, who is often obsessed with the wrong person, which, like Lester, the audience is well aware of. In the show's quest to find a protagonist, it's revealed that everyone is both a protagonist and antagonist to someone, whether they know it or not, and this is a sign of good writing. Just like in real life, everyone is the main character of their own story, and The Wire employs that concept in their scripts very well. Well, thanks for watching this episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.